welcome back to your Lakers cookery class. There's a real feeling of spring in the air at the moment and Easter time is here. So today we're going to make some Easter muffins. So first off, I'm going to weigh out 225 grams of plain flour. That's our 225, perfect. So next up, I'm going to weigh out my cocoa powder, and I'm looking for 55 grams for the cocoa powder. What this gives us is a nice chocolate flavour to our muffins as well. Just go slowly as I'm coming up to the number, a little bit at a time. 55, perfect. Next up, we want 1 teaspoon of baking powder, and then we just want a pinch of salt. So our next job we want to do is to sieve together all of our dry ingredients. So that's our flour, then our cocoa powder, our baking powder, and our salt. Make sure we get all the lumps out. And at this point, we're going to stir in our sugar. So next up, we're moving on to our wet ingredients. I have 2 eggs that I've already broken into a small bowl, and I do this to make sure I have no bits of shell in it and that the eggs are fresh. Just going to mix them together. And next up is buttermilk. So 250 mils of our buttermilk goes in. And our next ingredient is 6 tablespoons of sunflower oil. Put this together. Our next step, like with a lot of recipes, is we're going to add the wet ingredients to the dry. So make a little well in the middle. Add in the liquid, and I'm not doing this in an electric mixer because what we really just want to do is to stir it gently till it's all combined. We don't want to overbeat it. Yeah. So we just end up with quite a wettish consistency of a mix. And our next step is to get them into the baking trays and into the oven. So once I have my mixture done, I'm going to pop them into some baking trays. You could use a plain baking tray if you grease it, or you can use paper cases. In my instance here, I'm just using, again, little silicone molds. I find them great because you can use them over and over again. Just wash them when you're finished, dry them off, and they're reusable. What we're going to do now is we're going to scoop our mixture. What we call it here is we scoop and we scrape. Scoop and scrape. Just an easy way of remembering how to take it out. Going to be quite generous, so they're nice, decent sized cakes. So if you find that any of the molds don't have a lot in them, you can always go back and top them up near the end. Remember as well, we can use a little spatula just to make sure that we get all of the mix. Don't want to leave any hanging around in the sides of the bowl. Going to wipe up the tray and then pop it in the oven. into the oven. So my oven is set there to about 200 degrees. Give them a good quick blast to start, and they should take about 20 minutes. So while our cakes are in the oven, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on ahead and make our buttercream icing for the top of it. So we need 225 grams of softened butter, so leave it out overnight if you can. And for this recipe, part of the recipe, we are actually going to use our stand mixer because it'll make it much easier. But then again, if you don't have one, you can just whisk by hand. It'll just take a little bit more time. Okay, so that's our butter measured. So I'm going to add my butter to my mixing bowl. We're going to soften that up now with a little bit of liquid. And what you want is about a tablespoon, and you can either use a flavouring or you can use some milk. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add, I'm adding about maybe 2/3 of a tablespoon of a lemon flavouring, and then I'm just going to top that up with about 1/3 of a tablespoon of milk. If at any stage you feel that your icing is too hard, we can just add in a little bit more liquid. I'm going to pop this on. Just going to soften it all up. Our final ingredient for the icing for the top of our cakes is our icing sugar. And that's 350 grams. And we're going to sieve that before it goes in with the butter, just to take any large lumps out of it. So once our icing has been sieved, we're going to add that in with our softened butter. We'll mix it into it until it's into a really nice consistency. And like I said earlier, if you feel that it's not wet enough, then what we can do is we can add a tiny bit more milk to it. So once our buttercream is done, it's going to have a nice soft consistency, ready for piping on the top of our buns. So I have checked my cakes a little bit ahead of the timer. So always remember to get to know your own oven, that just because it says 20 minutes in the recipe, I always set my timer for about 5 minutes beforehand and check them. So it's less than 20 minutes and mine are done, so I'm going to take them out now. Very nice. Good chocolate muffins, and we're going to decorate them then in a few minutes. Once these have cooled, I'll probably leave them for 20 minutes to half an hour at least to let them cool down. If you ice them now, the icing is only going to melt on them. If you want to make them a bit smaller, there's quite a big muffin here, you might prefer to stretch it over 24 and make them smaller for little mouths. So now that your muffins have cooled, it's time to move on to icing. Don't worry if they come out as irregular shapes, that's the fun of home baking. Some of you might have piping bags at home, and if you do, what you're trying to use is maybe a star nozzle on it. If you don't have one, I'm going to show you how to use a piece of baking parchment. So what we're going to do is roll in from one corner. So you roll around on itself, so you end up with what looks like an ice cream cone. And you can make the nozzle as large or as small as you want. And now we're going to pop the icing inside. If it helps when you're done, you can pop a little bit of sellotape on just to stop it unraveling. And what can also help is when you're filling it, if you have something that it will stand in. So this is our icing from earlier. We're going to pop that into our piping bag. roll it down at the top. Don't worry, it'll always squeeze out onto your fingers somewhere along the way. Push it all the way down to the base until it starts to come out. Our plan then is to turn the icing on the top of our cake into a little nest. So if we start in the center, the pipe in a circle going around. Lovely. Try another one. Go again, start in the center, pipe outwards. Nice. So once more, just going to show you our icing around and around our circle. So this is like our little Easter nest that our Easter chicks have been on. And to finish it off, we just add our chocolate eggs. Hope you all really enjoy these for Easter Sunday.